Is Jordan Peterson a believer in God? Or is it just an intellectual who sees the utilitarian value in the Bible? If you're a fan or a follower of Jordan Peterson, I believe at one point or the other you must have had these questions yourself. Recently, Piers Morgan sat down with Jordan Peterson and grilled him on these questions. I want you to take a listen to this interview and be prepared to share your thoughts on these things in the comment section. So here are clips from the interview.
We who wrestle with God. Yep. A lot of your fans, there's all sorts of Jordan Peterson groups that you can join who debate whether you really believe in God or not. So let's just get it on the table. Do you believe in God?
I don't think that's anybody's business. I think it's the most private question you could ask someone, but then I would say also, what's the right response to that? By their fruits you will know them. How's that?
I kind of find this response amusing. First, it started by saying he doesn't think it's anybody's business because it's a personal question. That is true. Our salvation and our belief in God is personal, but also it's not something that we need to hide from the world. It's something that we need to profess out openly. And I want you to know one thing about Jordan Peterson. He's not a shy person or somebody who is timid or afraid to take on opposition. So if he has any opinion or if he shares any belief or has any beliefs, is not someone who is going to hide for fear of opposition. So him saying this is really quite amusing, or it's just fascinating to me. Then he went ahead and quoted Matthew chapter 7 verse 20. Therefore, by their fruit you shall know them, saying that, well, if you want to know if I'm a believer in God, you need to see my actions and you need to see the fruits in my life, and you can draw your own conclusion from there. But the interview continues.
Well, let me ask you a different question then. Do you think there is a God?
I'm terrified that there might be, Piers. How's that? And I'm not trying to be a smartass when I'm making that comment either. Like they say, it's an Old Testament saying, I believe, that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and that is actually about as true a statement as you could manage in such a short phrase. And people have congratulated me. I was at the Buckley Institute last night. They were congratulating me on my courage, and I said this last night. It's like, you guys don't understand. It has nothing to do with courage. I'm just afraid of different things than the people who lie. And I'm afraid, for example, of what happens when you lose control of your tongue. And I said that back in 2016 when I first opposed the Canadian government. And people were, congratulating me. It's like, well, you're so brave to stand up to the government. It's like, I'm nowhere near as afraid of the government as I am of what happens when people lose control of their tongue. I studied totalitarianism since I was 13 years old, in depth. And I know what happens when people lose control of their tongue. What happens is everything goes to hell. And I mean that metaphysically. I might even mean it theologically, but you can just say, don't even bother with that.
But what's fascinating...
Let's just mean it practically.
But what's interesting is, I completely agree with you, by the way, and you are the most open book of almost anyone I've ever interviewed, right to the point I asked you if you believe in God. I didn't actually know what you were going to say, but for some reason you're reluctant to say. Why are you reluctant?
Well, okay, let's walk along that. Well, because it's not a well-posed question. It's too complicated an issue to be dealt with like that. You step into instant traps just by accepting the question. So I'll show you what I mean. So the first thing I would say is, what do you mean by believe? Like, do you think that a statement about the existence of God is something like a scientific theory? Do you think it's a list of facts? Is it a factual question? Does God exist or not? Is it a factual question like you're asking about whether a cup on a table exists or a plate on a table, an artifact in a room? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by believe? I'll stake my life on the proposition that God exists. How's that?
Wow, that's a very shocking statement that most people didn't see coming. He said he will stake his life on the proposition that God exists. So he's saying that he believes that God exists. But is that enough? That the fact that we believe in God, is that just enough? Because there are a lot of people who believe in the existence of God. So right here we can conclude that Jordan Peterson is not an atheist, because he is right here saying he can stake his life on the proposition that God exists. So we know clearly he's not an atheist. But we can go further and even ask more questions. Even before we go further, one thing that I want to make clear about Jordan Peterson is that he's such a remarkable intellectual. I believe in one of his books, The Spectator said this about him, that he's one of the most important thinkers to emerge on the world stage for many years. So by every standard, we can call Jordan Peterson an intellectual, and of course you expect maybe some intellectual responses. I was reading a book once by Rick Warren, I think it's Purpose Driven Life, and he was talking about how intellectuals love God by studying with their mind, meaning that one of the ways intellectuals show their love for God is how much they take their time in studying with their mind the things pertaining to God. And I believe that Jordan Peterson has also characterized this. But is that even enough to show your belief in God, or is that enough to make you a believer?
Well,
Is that an answer?
Well,
Because that's the right answer.
I would ask you, here's my supplementary. Do you ever pray?
Always.
Who do you pray to?
The spirit that protects you from hell.
But that, many people would say, is God.
Hey, sounds good to me. And so you might say, well, I said I pray always. So what does that mean?
Well, before we even go further, here is it. He's saying, do you pray? And says praying always, or the Bible says we should pray always, pray without ceasing. And now he's asking if you pray, and he's saying he's praying always. So who do you pray to? And now he gave an intellectual response, and Piers Morgan is saying, a lot of people will say what you have just said now is you're praying to God, and say that sounds okay to me. So in other words, he's admitting that he prays to God. So in this context, we can conclude that Jordan Peterson believes in God. He may not be coming out boldly to say it. He may not be coming out clearly to say it. I don't think boldly is the right word, because he's a very bold person. So he may not be coming out clearly to say it, but from everything he has been saying so far, it is very obvious that he believes in God.
I'm trying to say the clearest words I can say. And I do that by paying attention. I'm listening to the words and feeling them as I move along, thinking, is that a firm foundation in the morass? Is that a bridge over the abyss? Is that word the right word? I do that when I'm writing. I do that when I'm talking. And I do that because I don't want to be in the abyss. And the pathway over the abyss is the truth.
Okay, so now he's saying that he's trying to avoid the abyss, which is maybe like hell. And he's saying the only way you can do that is, the pathway to avoiding that is the truth. Jesus said of himself, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So here again is saying that the way to avoiding the abyss is through the truth. Who is the truth? Jesus is the truth.
Now, with regards to belief in God, you might say, and I know that you're not particularly religiously inclined, at least that's the theory. It's like, well, you have a character, Piers. Everyone has a character. You could say that would be the spirit of Piers Morgan. And then we might say, well, let's inquire into that spirit. If you were a hedonist, then the spirit that would be Piers Morgan would be your hedonistic whims. And that would be your God. I would say if you're a noble person, then your spirit is something elevated above your mere whims. And then there's the spirit that's inculcated within you. It's a consequence, perhaps, of your socialization, but in a more sophisticated way, it's actually a consequence of the spirit that you've allowed as a consequence of your choices to dwell within you. And that spirit has a nature. It might be allied with the truth. It might be allied with falsehood. If it's allied with the truth, it's a manifestation of what has been considered traditionally the logos. The more you're aligned with the truth, the more your spirit is an avatar of the logos.
So I think Jordan Peterson is a little coy about his responses and answers. And now the second part of the interview was with his daughter, Michaela, who is a professed Christian, and the mom, Jordan Peterson's wife, is also an avowed Catholic. So for me, I just wonder if things that happen in the family play a little part in Jordan Peterson's religious outlook. But I just want you to pay attention to some of the things that the daughter said in this interview.
I mean, that is miraculous, and it brings me back to what I asked you when it was just me and you talking, which is whether you believe in God. What happened to your wife, to Tammy, and her turning to God in that moment? Did that not give you all the proof you needed that there is a God?
Well, I was already very religiously inclined before that. I mean, I've been studying religious thinking for 40 years, and speaking to my students about that very diligently during that whole time. And so in some ways, I mean, the anniversary issue, that was very strange.
Yeah.
And the transformations that have occurred in relationship to Tammy are quite profound and wonderful and hard to believe. Was that additional evidence to me? I already had a lot of evidence, what we talked about in other, I was already a firm believer in hell, and I knew there was a route away from hell, and the route away from hell is a religious pathway. So I've been walking down that pathway a very, very long time. So this was just another, not just, you know what I mean? It's a milestone and a marker, but it wasn't, for me, that wasn't a qualitative transformation.
Did you dodge the God question in the previous interview?
Well,
He did.
I wouldn't.
I like how she asked, did you dodge the God question? It's almost as though she knows that it is something that he has always been trying to elude, to dodge the question whenever he's asked the question about, do you believe in God? And so the way she was asking him, did you dodge the question, is almost like, I just find that really funny.
Michaela, he did. And it was really,
I knew it.
It was really interesting. And in fact, it's almost like he's almost rewinding now, because if I'd asked him right now, I may have got a different answer. Because I think, Jordan, I think you do believe in God. And I think what's happened to your family has reinforced.
Yeah, I strongly believe that he believes in God. I don't think there's a question about, I don't think there's any question about whether he believes in God or not. The question right now is, will he come out openly to profess his belief in God? And I think that's the fundamental issue. And I think that he has said that he will stake his life on the proposition God exists. So for me, I find that strong enough statement that he believes in God.
Force that belief. But for some reason, you're reticent to just say it.
Modern people don't understand this question. They think that it's a matter of believing in a set of facts. It's not. If you believe in God, you allow the spirit of the Logos to take residence within you.
So again, I think it's just because of his, like I said, he is a very, very profound intellectual. And he approached everything, even the question of God, of the Bible, from an intellectual standpoint, and he will understand and appreciate where he's coming from with that. And now you see that he's talking about modern people don't understand it. So I think because he has had so many conversations with modern people or people in this modern world, he knows and understands what the question of do you believe in God means to them. And that's why I believe he's trying to just sidestep the question of that, do you believe in God? Because I think he just doesn't want to say it, because that would be something that people would just jump at to say, oh, you believe in this, you believe in this, and it's going to just lead to a whole new circus between him and some of the people who have always wanted to take him up on debate about the need for religion in society. So I think it's because of such audience that he's trying to craft carefully what he says, because he knows that they will always come to twist some of the things he's saying. And I think that's why he's trying to be as cautious and to be as careful in the things that he's is giving a lot of thought to some of the comments that he's making.
Now, but nobody understands what you mean if you say that. But like, think about it this way. Michaela could have got bitter and resentful. Well, the spirit of bitter resentment is the spirit of Cain, because her sacrifices would have gone unrewarded. She would have been rejected by God, and she would have shaken her fist at the sky. And the spirit of Cain is a Luciferian spirit, and it's a genocidal spirit. And you can allow that spirit to take up its residence within you. And that means that you're a follower of the Luciferian spirit. Or you can do the opposite. You can allow the spirit of the Logos to take residence within you. And that's what you're attempting to do if you adhere assiduously to a genuine religious practice.
Okay, Michaela.
And that's real.
All right,
it's real.
Let me ask Michaela. I mean, you said to me, did he dodge the question on God? Why did you say that?
I'm really interested in her response too. I will like to know why she said that.
Just to see what his face would look like if I said that while he was on Piers Morgan.
And his body language. The arms went up very quickly, I noticed. Quite defensive body language, Mr. Psychologist.
You gave her a chance to be annoying. She immediately took it.
Well, Michaela, go, explain why did you ask him about God? You asked me why.
Well, I believe in God.
Yeah.
And I didn't before. Or I wasn't sure before. I was never an atheist. But, when people say, do you believe in God? I'd say, I don't know. I don't really get it. I'd like to. I always wanted to. And so when Mom converted to Catholicism, and I saw, a whole bunch of really weird things that I couldn't logic out happened. Let alone Dad becoming famous and then us all getting so sick and an unbelievable amount of suffering. And then Mom's miraculous recovery that she knew ahead of time by 2 months, the date of, that nobody could explain.
You learned at least that you had no idea how the world worked.
Oh, absolutely none. That's what I learned is I don't understand what's going on at all. But I saw the transformation that took place in Mom, and I saw how much more compassionate she became because she's a very disagreeable woman, and I wouldn't say compassion is one of her strong suits. And she became more compassionate somewhat dramatically. And then
she's trying to love everybody in the world now. It's very annoying.
Yeah, it's not.
Here, you can see what's happening. Like every normal humans, I think they have faced some challenges in their lives, and one of them was with the sickness of his wife when she was terribly ill, and they actually saw a miraculous saving of his wife, a miraculous healing, I should say, of his wife. And then after the healing, the transformation that happened in her life, it's just beyond logic for them in the house. It's not something they could logic out. So that sense, it pointed them to something. And for his wife, she was able to become a Catholic, and for Michaela, the daughter, she became a strong believer in God. And I believe now she has her own platform where she shares her faith openly. So I think what happened to the family is something remarkable. You could argue that something remarkable happened as a result of the illness of his wife that really shaped their religious view.
Nice. And so that was enough that wasn't quite enough for me, actually. It was about a year later, and Dad was so sick, and I didn't know. I had exhausted everything I knew how to do to help. I couldn't think of any other way I could help. And I remember praying at that point because I literally couldn't think of anything else to do. I was just like, God, help us, help me. And I think it was around that period where something switched, and then my life got easier. And I don't know if that's because I let go of some control that I don't actually have, but my life switched directions, and I felt calmer in a way that I couldn't describe or come to any. I couldn't figure out why, and I figured that was God. So that was enough for me to say, reality isn't exactly how we see it. There's more going on out there. And
so here's another thing. For her, she got to a point of surrender. I think what she's saying here is very instructive, that if you want to really experience God, you have to get to a point that you surrender absolutely to Him. And sometimes what gets us to that point is where we get to a breaking point that you don't find, there's no way forward for you. You have come to the end of the rope. You have come to the end of yourself. And now you are relying on God to intervene. When God steps in those situations, that is what becomes the turning point for a lot of people. And that was what she experienced. At that point of surrender, she found God.
And Michaela, if
believe
I
in
asked
God.
you, Michaela, do you think your dad believes in God? What would you say?
Get it right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I do too.
He definitely, I think so. He definitely lives in a way where he knows that if he acts as if he believes in God, then he avoids hell. So I don't know what the difference
That's a good
between
deal.
that
Yeah.
and belief is. Why would you do that if you didn't believe? Right?
Right,
Seems
George?
reasonable to me.
Right,
Seems
George?
reasonable to me.
Right, George?
He agrees. He agrees. So she unequivocally stated that he believes in God, and he doesn't have any comments to that, or he doesn't have any rebuttal to that. So that's actually that him saying that he believes in God.
Sometimes it's always good to bring out the daughter.
Yeah, I think that brought a lot of clarity. But again, this is not just about the question of do you believe in God? So it's about more of, if you believe in God, do you have to openly come out to profess your faith before you are accepted before God, or before your belief in God is valid? I want to hear your comments on this, that the fact that he's been sneaky about coming out openly to say yes, unequivocally, that he believes in God, do you think that invalidates his belief in God? And I would like to hear your thoughts. Do you think he's a Christian in the Bible sense? So please, in the comment section, drop your thoughts on these things. What do you make of this interview? Do you think somebody who's talking like this, do you think it's an indication that they believe in God? Or do you think that all these are just empty talks and they don't have any substance to them? I would really love to hear your thoughts on these things in the comment section. Also, don't forget to like this video, and if you have not subscribed to this channel, kindly hit the subscribe button. I'll see you next time.